Hello, teachers. My name is Betsy Woods. I'm an English teacher at Milford High School. I'm also the Ohio Writing Project Professional Coordinator, and I would love to share a lesson with you today that I use with my English students in Senior English AP Literature. So, this is actually a lesson that we just recently completed. My students were reading A Midsummer Night's Dream in class. We read the entire play together in class. So the sonnet lesson was their homework assignment during that unit. And I had a couple specific goals for my students. Goal number one is primarily to showcase their facility with the language of Shakespeare. So what they did was they chose a sonnet that they could use, and they produced an audio recording of the sonnet. Goal number two, I talked with my students a lot about, and that was using personal problem solving skills to create a project involving technology. So I didn't teach my students what tools to use. I gave them some advice. I gave them some guidelines, but I let them pick both the sonnet and the audio tool that they wanted to use to complete the project. I thought you would probably as well like to see some of the Common Core standards that align to my project. So I copied onto this slide some of the speaking and listening standards from that particular strand of the Common Core state standards. I was also going to copy the standards from the reading strand, but as most English teachers know, we cover multitudes of those standards almost with everything we do in class. So it would be like 7, maybe 8 standards. I trust that once you understand the project and you want to look at the standards, you would be able to pick those out as well. Moving on, these are the directions, some of the directions that I gave to my students. So they chose their own sonnet by William Shakespeare. They read it, sometimes several times. They analyzed the sonnet until they felt they had an honest and critical understanding of it. They made an audio recording that evinces an understanding of the piece. And that's the verb choice there. I wanted to note that that's not necessarily a verb from the Common Core standards. It's just a verb I want my students to know and understand. I try to take almost every opportunity to improve their vocabulary, and that includes inserting certain words in directions that they have to read. So the recording also concludes a brief analysis of a poem. And the suggested length that I gave them was 3 minutes. On my website, you will find a sample sonnet recorded by one of my students, Austin. I thought it was a great example for you to listen to. And I think he does an excellent job of providing the analysis in a very conversational tone. And his reading was one of my favorites as well. So the Sonnet Project offers several things for my students, including choice, which I always think is very important for students. So there are 2 things that my students get to choose in this project. Number one is the sonnet itself. Granted, they're not choosing any poem out there to record because the goal is very specific and it has to do with the language of Shakespeare. But they're also choosing an audio tool. And if on my website, you'll see where I've listed a lot of the different tools that I recommended and also the tools that my students decided to use. So what I also like about the project is the problem solving with technology, which I mentioned earlier. I think if I did this project 5 years ago, I would have felt compelled to teach my students a specific tool, perhaps Audacity. If we had Macs, I'd be teaching them GarageBand, and have all of them learn one technology tool and complete this project. I'm no longer in that place, and I don't think many of us are in that place anymore, especially with upper level students. So what I heard about 5 years ago from so many English teachers about projects like this is that they felt they were teaching technology and not English. So I feel like we're in a good place with that now. And if we trust our students to use the apps on their phone, and we trust our students and really discuss with them that we have confidence that they can do this project and they can problem solve themselves, I think we get to a much better place with our own curriculum. Number 3 on my list is one of my favorite reasons for doing this project is that I didn't have to give a sonnet test. I knew from the recordings of my students which students understood the language of Shakespeare and understood the sonnet that they chose to write about. I know that they know sonnets are 14 lines. I know that they can determine a rhyme scheme of a poem. Those are sort of questions I no longer need to ask on a test for my students. Finally, the project supported our reading of A Midsummer Night's Dream. It just sort of enhanced the immersion that I felt my students had with the text and with Shakespeare's language. So overall, I hope you enjoy the website that I put together, and you can use it perhaps in a similar way. I have a lot of ideas for using the audio in the classroom, and I hope you're enjoying your professional development time with the Higher Writing Project. I know that I always do. My contact information is on my webpage, so I'd love to hear from you. And thanks again for listening to my screencast about my sonnet project.